Hello everyone. So today we're gonna talk about how and why to build React apps with RxJS. So before we get started, let me introduce myself. My name is Gabriel Tosta. I'm 25 years old and I'm living in Brazil. Currently, I work as a software consultant, so I work in some companies here in Brazil, and also I have my own startup called HeroA, which aims to help people get their first jobs in as a software developers. Well, once that's said, let's get started about RxJS. So what is RxJS? RxJS is a library for composing asynchronous event-based programs by using observables sequences. It provides one core type that is the observable, the most important that we're gonna work here in this talk, and another ones, the observer, schedulers, and subjects, and also it provides some operators inspired by the methods in the arrays like map, filter, reduce, and some others. And it allows us to handling some asynchronous events as collections. So RxJS is a library that helps us to build asynchronous tasks in a much easier way and um, yeah, a simple way, a easier way. Let's get started and understanding and how RxJS works, and it will be more simple to you to understand what is RxJS. So before we get started to the code, let me talk about the Angular. So you can ask me, okay, Gabriel, but why are you talking about Angular in React in a React Conf? RxJS is a library created by the Google as well as the Angular framework. So it means that these two libraries built on top of are built for from a company very big, very important in our market. And the Angular uses RxJS in its core. So it's very important to know because once that's said, we know that the RxJS will not die. It will be used for a long, long time. The Angular is used by some very big apps like Gmail, YouTube, the Office, the Xbox as well, and uh, those apps uses RxJS behind the scenes. So it's very important to know because once that's said, we know that we can use this library, and this library is very important. It will help us in the future, and it will not die. Well, okay, so how does as a RxJS works and how does string works? Strings are a pattern. Strings are a pattern that is used by RxJS since we have a pipe of values being emitted, and we can handle these values. Uh, One after another, like in a string, like a promise. So let me show you an example, and we'll go further in the RxJS and the strings in the next slides. Okay, so here we have a picture that has an observable dot interval, and we pass as parameter 10, the value 10 here. It means that we are going to emit 10 values 10 times, one after another, and we can see in this diagram the values being emitted. Here in the right side, we can see how this code works, how we are emitting this code. So first of all, we have the RxJS um, variable here, dot interval. It's a function of RxJS, and we are passing as parameter 1000. That is the 1000. It's 1 second in milliseconds. and after that we can create a pipeline of functions through the pipe function. And here we are saying to RxJS.interval that we are going to listen until the value emitted by Rx interval reaches to the value 10. So once that's said, we can use the dot subscribe function, and this dot subscribe will have a callback function that will capture the value emitted by the observable. I know this is a bit complex in the first view, but we are going to see how it works in the next slide. In the next slides. So let's see this example running in in a real example. So I'm opening here CodePen. Let me open my console console, okay, and we can see here the values being emitted 0 1 2 3 4 5 up to 9, and when it takes 10 values from 0 to 9 it stops because we are pipelining our interval here. If I remove this value, let me just remove this pipe, we can see that the interval will we're gonna pipe infinitely. So it starts from 0, and we can see that it will go on and go further. And we can just um, we will just capture the event through the subscribe function. Okay, so this is the first contact with RxJS. It's very important to know how it works because uh, it doesn't make sense to go to the React without understanding how RxJS works. Okay, so well, uh, that's how RxJS and string works. Okay, so the first thought that you might have is what are the differences between strings and promises? And we have one major differences between these two. The promises are promises is a communication channel that receives only one value. So we call a promise and we have just one value as a return. And a string is a little bit different. Uh, Once we have um, one call and many values can be received. So this is the main difference between those two. A promise just receives one value. On the other hand, a string receives many values. Okay, well, once that's said, we can think that RxJS is almost a Lodash for asynchronous code. Okay, it's very important to understand because we can create very complex things, very difficult things through RxJS. It's very important, very interesting. Well, okay. So um, let's go step by step in how the observable works in what we created in our previous slide here in some fragmented ways. Okay, so the first thing that we have to know is what is an observable. So observable is a function that emit values of any different ways. So we can just emit a lot of values, and it can be subscribed via the subscribe function, as we said, actually, as we saw in our previous example. Let me show you it here in our example. Okay, um, so here we have an observable, the interval, and we have subscribe. And here in this subscribe, we can see every value that is emitted by this RxJS.interval. We can have a lot of subscriptions here, and each one of these callbacks will emit separately. So let me show you. opening my console here, we have the first and the second subscription emitting the same value. This is very important to understand that we can have multiple subscriptions here in just one uh, by just one interval, okay? Well, uh, so now let's understand how the operators works. So the operators are functions that are made to build on top of an interval. So we have an interval, or actually an observable, sorry, and through this observable, we can create a pipeline and create a lot of operators that help us to handle this code. Okay, so the operator take here, it will, as we said before, will listen to the interval up to 4 values. Since we emitted 4 values, it will stop. Okay, so let's see our example here. Here I have an example with 10 values. It's almost the same example we said on the first the first code, the first slide, and it, as we said, it will emit 10 values. Okay, okay. So it's very important to note as well the subscribe. The subscribe it's the function that we use to subscribe actually to an observable to understand how it works, to understand uh, what values are being emitted, and actually to create something in our code based on this value. So we can have multiple subscriptions, as we said before. Here we have the here we have the example. Okay, same thing, we have just the subscribe here, and also we can create a unsubscribe. I can create here my subscription, okay, and I can just unsubscribe from my subscription, and that's gonna work as well. Okay, well, and uh, for at last we can understand how a subject works. Subjects are very important here in the RxJS because we can create an observable, we can subscribe to this value, but we can also emit values to this using a subject. It will allow us to be much more precisely in order to emit a value and to manage the content we are going to use in our application. So let me show you how a subject works here in RxJS. So I have here in my code pane a subject uh, through the new rxjx.subject, and as I said, as I told you before, we can use the subscribe function here, and we have a console.log. So this subscribe will emit when we send some value. So here we can send a value using the .next function. So if I open my console here in the console, okay, I will see that we will see that we have the next value 1, value 2, and value 3 inside a timeout, and we have these values being printed here in our console log because we are capturing these values through our subscribe function right here. If I refresh my page, I can see it again, value 1, value 2, and after some while the value 3. Okay, so a subject is very important because we can emit the values in a much more simple way. Okay, and okay, also we have the behavior subject. The behavior subject it's almost the same thing of the subject, but we can start the subject with some value. So it's very interesting because here we have the subscribe being emitted with the value Olá Mundo, that means hello world in Portuguese. So after that, we have next valor next valor 2, and next valor 3, um, working as we said before using the subject. Okay, so once we understand the basics here of RxJS, we can understand how we can implement that in React apps. So let's start. Let's back here to our slide, and now we're gonna understand how we can create an application with React using RxJS. Okay, so our first example is an application using React with Redux and RxJS. We bind the Redux actually with the RxJS through a library called Redux Observables. So the application it's a simple app with 2 pages. The first one is a GitHub users page where we can find some user. So if I type my user here, it will take a while, and I can see my user. If I put any other user, I can see the result as well as a simple request to the GitHub API. And the other page is a to-do list with some to-dos, doing and done things. The content doesn't matter, it's some Portuguese things here. But the idea here is to show to you why RxJS is so important here, and what we can do using it. So the first thing that I wanted to tell you, to show to you, is in the GitHub user tabs. Let me show you the code. Here in Redux, that's the most important thing here in our code. I would like to show you the GitHub. And here in GitHub, using Redux observables, we have to create an action, an special action called epic. Here we are gonna create our epic, and this epic is how we're gonna handle an action. Okay, so here we're gonna handle all the actions that are equals eactions.http search GitHub users. So every time I dispatch an action called search GitHub user, this action, this function here will be executed. So we haven't went deep before in RxJS, but we have another operator here called the bounce time. Using this debounce time, every time I dispatch an action called search GitHub user, I will debounce this action for 1 second, and after that, after this 1 second, I will go through another operator here called switch map. This switch map it will get the user in the GitHub API, and using the result of this query, we're gonna map the result in an action. So we have here a type and a payload. That's very interesting because we can debounce our request. So I can back here in my application, and if I start typing, if I spend less than 1 second, I don't go, my application won't go make any request, and just after 1 second, I will have the request made. So that's why I have my debounce time here. So if I just comment this code, save my code, and back here in my application, let me just refresh the application. If I start typing, look here in my terminal what's going to happen. Every time I type, I'm going to cancel my last request. That's because I have a switch map here. That's the operator that does that. So it's very interesting what we can do using RxJS. So we can handle actually a lot of things here, asynchronous code here in a very easy way, very understanding and interesting way. So we can achieve this kind of thing here in your GitHub action, search GitHub users epic. And the other page I would like to show you is our to-do list. Our to-do list, it happens almost the same way. If I show you the index.ts here, we're gonna have a get to do's epic, and this in here in get to do epic, I can do. We are doing here two things. A take until operator. This operator will cancel our request. So if I dispatch some action called cancel to do's, we're gonna cancel our request. And if this action doesn't happen, our request is gonna happen naturally. Everything will work well. So let me show you how we can cancel our action. I have here a action called cancel get to do's. So if we search here in our code, I am using this action in a component will unmount of our class port. Okay, so if I toggle between these two pages very quickly, we are gonna see our to-do page, our to-do request actually being canceled. So let's see. That's very interesting. It's very interesting because Netflix uses uh, RxJS in order to cancel their request and everything else. So we are using here the same mechanism they use in their platform. So it's very interesting what we can do, what we can achieve so easily using RxJS. So in this example, I showed you how we can implement this using Redux, but we can implement this actually using RxJS natively. So let me show you. I have another branch here called RxJS. Let me install the dependencies here real quick. So yeah, start. Okay, so once we can see here our application, I will show the code. So here in the code, we have some services, and in these services we have the logic behind RxJS. So I have a service called API, which just calls or requests in the backend, and also I have the GitHub and the to-dos services. So here in the GitHub services, I have a public get, a function get that receives a query. This query is an observable, is a subject observable. So every time I dispatch a next value through our search user, this dot query will be triggered. So we can just the bounce time and switch map our code exactly the same way we did in the example using Redux observables. So it's much more cleaner and simpler to implement. So in our application, we have just to call our search user. So let me show you. Here in our GitHub component, I have a function called search GitHub user that triggers the function from my service, passing the text to the user type as a parameter. So it's very interesting how we can do to achieve the behavior we expect to get the user. And also we have on our component did mount are subscribed in order to get those values uh, from the API and to set the state here and to show the content on our page. So it's very interesting the way we can manipulate and handle our code using RxJS. So let me show you. Here we have the service and our component side by side. Very, very interesting. We have these two guys here. So also we can store the subscription here to in order to unsubscribe when our component dies, when we unmount our component. So the application works the same way. We can type our user here, it's gonna debounce some time, and then we're gonna have the result. If I show you the network, uh, let me show you, we're gonna have just one request to the backend, so it's very interesting. The same thing happened to the to-dos. So I have here the to-dos service, and the to-do services we have an add to-do, change to-do, move to-dos, and our get to-dos. The get to-dos is the most important for us because the get to-dos is when we get the to-dos from the backend, and we have another function here called load to-dos. The load to-dos get the to-dos from the backend and convert it and store the value from this request to our these to-dos, to our subject called these to-dos. So I have this to-do here, and we are listening this subject through our get to dos. So if I don't have any to dos or if I don't have any value cached, I'm gonna get the to dos automatically here by my to do services. And also we are going to return our to dos as an observable. So what does that mean? It means that we can use dot next here. So for our component, the component can't use dot next. The component just can hear and subscribe to what our to-dos are receiving. Okay, so if I gonna if I search here my get to-dos, I gonna see on my board component that we gonna have our get to-dos passing false as variable because we don't like to cache, so we are passing cache equals false, and then we are subscribing the value the same way we did in the GitHub example. Okay, so when our component will unmount, we can cancel the to-dos request if uh, the request is still happen, and also we are unsubscribing our service here or to-do services. Okay, so we're gonna have the exactly same behavior I showed you in the GitHub. So the to-dos are being canceled, and we can have the bounce here in the GitHub users. So it's very interesting the way we can use the RxJS in our application. It's very cool. And in the first time, it could be a bit difficult to understand, but it's worth. I promise you. I promise you, it's worth the learning. Okay. So well, back here to our slides. The advantages of using the RxJS with React is that the application is very performant. It has a performance very good. So the RxJS used by the Angular team. So it's guaranteed that that we're gonna have an application very performatic, and also it's very versatile. So very good at this point. Uh, the RxJS has a wide range of functions that help us to create complex tasks. So as I showed you, we can debounce time, we can cancel requests, we can do a lot of things um, in a simpler way. So it's very good. And also it's used and supported by large companies. So as I said before, Facebook, sorry, Google is using the RxJS. They created the library, so it's very used and supported by big companies. So it's very, very good for us that are using the library. Okay, so the disadvantages is the learning curve. So as you could see, it's a bit complicated in a first moment to understand what's going on and how we can abstract and think using RxJS, and also the unusual data flow state for React developers. So in the Redux observables, the first example that I showed you, we used a single flow state, okay, but using RxJS um, without any other library, you could see that I used a pattern MVC or something like that to organize my code. So for the developers who has who are accustomed to work with React, it could be a bit strange at the first moment, but I guarantee you that's very interesting and cool library and a new way to think as well. Okay, so thank you for the time with me here. Thank you for the patience, and I hope you learned something. And if you have any questions, you can get in contact with me. I would like to talk to you. I would love to answer your questions and everything else. So thank you and bye bye.